The costume from Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale has become a uniform of resistance for those protesting against the recent threats to reproductive rights. It is not the first time literature has played a pivotal role in women's rights campaigns. Simone de Beauvoir's book, The Second Sex, inspired the first protests for abortion rights in the 1960s.
When I was growing up in the late 60s and 70s, Simone de Beauvoir was incredibly important, looking at a woman who had written about the condition of being woman.
Lisa Pignesi, biographer of Simone de Beauvoir, says that Beauvoir was seen as the glamorous icon of political resistance.
The 60s and 70s, of course, were the great times of social rebellion. So Simone de Beauvoir fell into that period with Sartre. After the student uprising of 68, we're out on the streets selling newspapers and protesting with the students.
I went to the London School of Economics to speak to Mary Evans, specialist in feminist literature, to find out more about Beauvoir's involvement in the fight for reproductive rights.
The great public declaration of her support was, I think, in 1971. I think it was 343 very famous French women signed a public letter saying they'd had an abortion in circumstances when abortion was illegal in France. And at that time, actually up to, I think, the late 60s, early 70s, it was quite possible, it was still on the statute books, that women performing, or men indeed, performing illegal abortions could be guillotined in France. And that actually happened.
From Alabama to Argentina, women's reproductive rights are being challenged across the globe. I spoke to abortion rights activist Hannah Orr, who says that in the recent political climate, the conversation on reproductive rights is now public.
I think people are really being pushed to come out either side, so I think it's no longer accepted to be neutral anymore, especially with repeal. That was massive, and people couldn't just hide back and say, you know, this happens behind closed doors, I don't want to know about it.
Hannah thinks that complicated literature, such as Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex, is not accessible to the wider public.
Like 20-30% of people, women, identify as feminists in the UK. So I think the problem now is introducing the very basic concepts of feminism before we go into individual theories and strands of feminism.
In 1949, Beauvoir wrote, "Women live under men's sexual surveillance. Whatever their stances on abortions may be, the women of Wascombe, Alabama, Argentina, and Northern Ireland are still subjected to the decisions of the male population, or what Simone called the first sex." Gaia Caramazza, City News.